week at National Library Week. Tomorrow, I just want to let you know that Mark Tyler Noble will be coming. He's a nationally known author, and he's going to tell us about who really was the first person to write about Batman and to that information. Okay? So he's going to be a great speaker. So come and listen to him. And then, of course, Donna Henry is tomorrow, Thursday. And she's doing culpability, plus she'll have about 4 or 5 other books she's going to talk about. And you'll want to be there for that because it's on AI and gaming and video gaming. If you haven't gotten your tickets for Murder Mystery, please come. They're $30, and that includes dinner. And it's the murder of the mystery detective. So the Friends of the Pioneer Memorial Library is working very hard to make that happen, and so it'll be down here on Saturday evening. The doors open at 6:15. Tickets are available. We still have our ESL classes on Thursdays at 6:30. Then you can speak any language, just kind of learn English. We have summer reading kickoff coming May 28th in the library. That's for adults and teens. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. We now have a spring one out, so I didn't change that. If you want to know about new books, please listen to Self-Indulgence by Vi and Katie and others. And then if you are traveling, remember that check out books longer than just 2 weeks. You're going to be gone 3 weeks. Check about longer. You can also check books out on digital by Hoopla or on Sunflower E-Library. You can do audio books. You can do, the flip the page books. You can even do a movie if you want to. And that's all the announcements I have today. So let me invite Sarah Henning. She's going to talk to us about some of her books. Our book club read her books on the lies we conquer, and it was quite good. And we enjoyed it a lot. Sorry. Don't have my notes. There we go. So I'm going to let her introduce herself to you, and I'm going to plug her in and turn me on.
All right. Oh, the guy for hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here. My name is Sarah Henning, and I'm the author of several books for young adults. I'll tell you a little bit about those books and about me. But really, I want to tell you kind of how publishing works. Pull back the curtain a little bit because I think that's one of the cool things I can do as an author. Explain like how publishing works. But okay, maybe I should just not touch it. That's like the way to go. I don't know. What's happening? Okay. See if I move my slides, maybe we just put it up here. Okay. So first, a little bit about me. I am born and bred Kansan. I am from Overland Park originally, Kansas City. I have lived in Lawrence though for the majority of my life at this point. So I am a Jayhawk. I know I probably in Wildcat pretty cool then. But I'm very proud to be a graduate of PU and have Spanish. And I worked for 10 years and mostly as a sports journalist, but also a research journalist. I bounced around the East Coast. I was in Pennsylvania. Ever seen show The Office? I was in Scranton for a year. I can tell you what that's really like. And I was in South Florida for a few years before coming back to Kansas. My first book, Sea Witch, which we have right here, came out in 2018. And my 10th book, called Running Back to You, which is set in Kansas, came in 2025. Oh no, gosh. Okay. If it does it again and I don't notice, please tell me. My 11th book comes out this summer. It's called Such a Witch. And you can see from, if you can read the bottom, I'm not gonna read all those things, but basically I've been very fortunate to have a career where I've written fantasy to contemporary and then back again, and then sometimes mishmash together for younger readers. So my books are really funny in that they don't look like they go together at all, except that they have my name on them. Like I am really all over the place. And I've actually been published by all five publishing houses, so I'll tell you about that later. First, I'll kind of level get my books. And I know there are 11 books on here. I said I had 10 books. I'm part of an anthology that's cool that I'll also mention. So this will stay up for a little while. It's very pretty. I like how the light looks. So my first book that I mentioned, Sea Witch, right here, came out in 2018. It is a Junior Library Guild selection. It is a Yalta selection, and it just became a musical production on the West End, London. We just got back from London. That was really cool to see. So they've been everywhere. And it's beautiful. The cover is gorgeous. I really love down on covers. But it is an origin story for Hans Christian Andersen's Sea Witch. So not the sled necessarily, but the Sea Witch, if Hans Christian Andersen original title, which I read as an adult and felt like Disney betrayed me a little bit. Because the Sea Witch in that story is way more neutral. She's somebody that's this girl who wants to leave her family and her friends and everything she knows for a boy that doesn't know her name. And then the Sea Witch helps her anyway, even though she might die. And I wanted to write back why this woman would want to help this girl go up deep. And it's set in a time when Hans Christian Andersen would have been alive in the 1860s Denmark. Sort of alternate Denmark as magic exists. I also created mountains that don't exist just for blocking purposes. So I always apologize to Danish people. But super fun, and I used some of their real history. Like many places, they had witch hunts and witch burnings. They actually have a holiday where they still burn effigies of witches in June, and so that's central to the plot as well. Although the witch hunter king that they had personally liked to burn women, he existed about 220 years before the story. So anyway, full of real history about the Danes and you're interested. And then it was supposed to be a standalone. So if you read this book, you're not dropped off a cliff. But it did so well that my editor was like, "Order another?" And I was like, "Sure, I'm thinking about it for 3 years." And she's like, "Great, it comes out next year." No one. So I wrote Sea Witch Rising, which actually is more of a retelling of The Little Mermaid. It's about the people who are left behind. So if you have seen the Disney version or read the Hans Christian Andersen version, the mermaid has sisters. She has a whole family, and they're like, "Where'd she go? Why'd she do it? What happened?" And so in this case, I wrote it about a twin sister who's like, "Wait, she did what?" And then she goes after her. She's trying to save her. And it is set during World War I in Denmark. So using real history there, they were technically neutral, but because of their location near Germany, they're not neutral. And so I thought it'd be interesting to write about my that I can think of it, I did it again. So yeah, so these two books are they are sequels, but like again, you don't get dropped off a cliff. And then these three pretty ones at the top is a completed trilogy that is a gender bent version of The Princess Bride. Basically, if you've seen that movie, it's lovely. They're fantasy trips, basically. It's about a princess whose father dies right away. It's not a spoiler. And she finds out that to become queen, she has to get married. And she's 16. And she's like, "Well, this is terrible. I might be in love with my best friend. He's a stable boy, and I don't want to do that." And so to kind of push her hand into marriage, her stable boy best friend is stolen away by pirates. And instead of giving in the blackmail, she goes to get in. So I like how the titles get silly worse. This will say you, the people betray you, the people kill you. And then the part also gets more dramatic. I really thought when I gave them that title for the first one, they'd be like, nah, that's right. But they did, and they let me write all three. And those are books that, if you get to the end, you're going to be really happy that all three are out. Because you are dropped off the list. And then I guess if we're going clockwise, if you can see, I don't know if you guys over here can see, this book down here, Throw Like a Girl, is very different from the ones on the top row. It is set in Kansas. It is about a down spiraling softball player. See, not a backup quarterback to her ex-boyfriend's football team, and that's not him on the cover. It's set in Kansas, like I said, and actually it's done very well thanks to Taylor and Travis. They did like a new light, which has been great. Again, I said I had a sports background. A lot of my characters tend to be athletes, even if that's not central to the plot, which if you read the Missy Conjure, the book club, you may have noticed. And then next to it is It's On How You Fall, which is a companion book. So it's in the same world, it's not necessarily a direct sequel. I was a competitive gymnast for 10 years, and so this is my quitting gymnastics book. Because when you do a sport like that, where you were working out 5 hours a week and then you're not, you kind of look at yourself and go like, who am I? Like, what is my life? And so it's about a girl who gets injured, back injury, and she can't go on anymore. As a gymnast, she can do other stuff. And so her older brother's best friend, who's a 3-sport athlete, is like, hey, spend the summer finding like something that you can do with your time. Just for fun, like not for the like big competition that she had been used to. And she decides that she is going to thank him by setting him up with one of her best friends, who is a gymnast that is so serious she's homeschooled now. And chaos. And then the next one there is running back to my most recent book. It is technically not young adult. So it's a little inside baseball. Young adult books, usually the characters are 16 and up, sometimes 15 and up. I have a 15-year-old and it's on nightfall. And then middle grade, books like Wimpy Kid are usually for readers ages 8 to 12. The characters are 11. And so then those 13 and 14-year-olds don't have books about them. Like they just don't exist. And then you're jumping from like a little chapter book to like a more mature YA book. So I have this really lovely editor at SNS who is trying to specifically acquire rom-coms for 13 and 14-year-olds. So this story has high school freshmen for 14, and it's about a girl who never lies, thanks to some stuff with her mom. But then some school gossip happens. They start talking about a kiss that happened at school, and of course it got filmed, you know how kids are. And she gets asked to point, look in study hall, have you ever been kissed? And instead of like saying the truth, which is no, she like just snowballs into a lie. Like she makes up a kiss, she makes up a toy that doesn't exist, that does, and she just like totally whips it. Everyone, she's lying, that's filmed. And she feels terrible. Like she knows the gossip machine is going to turn on at the high school, but she feels bad about it. And so she and her best friend come up with a plan to go after her twin brother's best friend, who seems like he might be interested. But she doesn't make classes with him, so they join the track because he runs track. And of course, the boy who asked her about being kissed is there all the time when she doesn't want it. I'm going to skip over the Lesbian Conjure since some of you read it. I'll finish with that. We can skip over to the Monster there on the end. I mentioned up in middle grade when I was talking about running back to you. Monster Camp is middle grade. So it's for readers ages 8 to 12. Characters are 11 and 12. It's about a girl who just finished 6th grade, and 6th grade is terrible, and so she would pretend to be a vampire in 6th grade. And so she spends a lot of time doing live action role play as a vampire. Sick on bangs, all of it, fake blood, fruit punch. And she goes to a camp that she thinks are people like her, like tend to be monsters. And it turns out they're actual monsters. And she's stuck inside this camp and has to pretend to be a vampire, all these monsters. And there's a werewolf named Chad, sort of nemesis. It's super fun. And it actually was nominated for Brand Super Award, which is done by the Horror Society. I think it's the International Horror Society, which is really, really cool to have them, you know, call out that little book. And then next to it is At Our League, which is the anthology I'm part of. It's also a junior grade gold selection. And it is 16 kind of sort of connected stories about girls and non-binary people expressed by girls and women and binary authors. And because of my sports writing background, I was one of the first like authors that the editors went for. And the idea is that each story covers a different sport. And because of my background, I was like, I'll do whatever. I didn't want to pick a sport and preclude an author who only knows how to confidently write about like soccer or football or baseball, softball, something like that. So I ended up doing cross country. Sorry, I keep like laughing into my microphone. And cross country doesn't get a lot of love. It's a sport a lot of kids do to stay for other sports. But one of the fun things you get to do as an author is I got to explore something that actually happened at my high school I've been thinking about for years and fictionalize it. So it's a story about a girl who is really serious about cross country, and then the longtime coach retires and the basketball coach takes over and makes the entire basketball team, boys basketball team, run cross country, really just as conditioning. And she's not happy about that. And there's a boy that thinks that it's his fault this whole thing is happening. So it's told in their point of view, which is really fun. And then The License Hunter, which is awesome that it was looking as a book that you guys covered. So that's my Knives Out with Magic book. It is about 13 witches and 2 girls who are not, who are stuck in the like a magical spell. And it's a closed room murder mystery with witches. Super fun. It actually was a Kansas Notable Book for 2025, which is really neat. And it's funny because it's set in Colorado. But I was really honored to have that honor. I don't know who nominated me, but I like that's really, really cool. And so, yeah, that is, it looks a little bit more serious than I think they were kind of trying to get like a little bit more adult the other books. And I also should say, I forgot to say, The Princess Will Save You was the Reader Cross campus book for Washington University in Topeka. So I went and talked this year, and it was really neat that they picked a book that was actually for like the freshmen to read. That was like something that in their kind of age wheelhouse. So that's kind of my high level views of my books. I hope that wasn't too boring, but it's a pretty slide. I'm sorry. Okay, and then I have this book out in July, and there's some bookmarks on your table if you want to take one, just remember it's happening. This is pitched as Clueless Meets Wednesday. So it's a magical murder mystery at like a magical school, but with the beats of Clueless. So if you've seen that movie or read Emma, which Clueless is based on, but wish for a higher body count, that is what this book is. It's super fun and silly. In fact, it was so fun that my editor was like, do another. So I just got to announce this one a couple of weeks ago. But it is about a diviner and a werewolf, kind of doing the 10 things I hate about you to stay with like the 90s and 2000s thing, set at the same magical school, and it'll come out a year from now. And I have a book I can't talk about that's actually due next week that I was here, like I was driving, husband drove me so that I could work hard and make my deadline. But publishing means you keep a lot of secrets for a long time, how they tell you to say something. Yeah, so I'm going to just kind of give you a high level how to become an author. Because I really like to demystify things, as I said. Maybe you've had other people come in with publishing works, if you haven't. But I'm happy to answer a lot of questions about how it works. One of the interesting things about being an author is that like, when we're kids and we're here at a library like this, you're reading books, authorship is something that you learn as a job that you can do. You can make books when you're very young, but how it works is kind of mystifying. Because it's not like you get a degree. If you get an MFA, past, NC fine arts degree in creative writing, it's not like they hand you a book deal. Like, it doesn't matter, like, and what I love about it is that you can literally be anywhere and do anything, and you can be an author. Like, I love it about being an author. So I have a little 3-step plan that I like to explain to people about how you become an author. And I only know about traditional publishing. I don't know much about self-publishing. So this is how you do it if you want like the editor sipping the lattes in New York. Step 1 is read. I know this seems dumb, but I think it's extremely important for people to know, because if you want to write, usually you're are doing a million other things, right? You are working, finding with family, you're trying to fit in writing time, and then your reading time drops off. But as you read, you're kind of educating yourself over and over and over again about the craft of writing. So this is what you see when you walk in my house. The books, my cats. I always use this picture of my son, which looks very staged, but he's actually, it would be staged if you were reading. He's actually, he's a high schooler, that's what he does. But I just like the animal books. So reading is something that is extremely important if you want to write. Usually, like, if you get out of the habit of it, you're like, I want to write, but you don't get a chance to, just try to make time. I love audiobooks. I like them reading it to me while I'm running in the morning, so that I can like keep up with what's happening. But every time you read a story or you watch a TV show, or sometimes even listen to songs, some songwriters are just amazing and storytellers, you were picking up something about how to tell a story. You know, things about plotting, pacing, dialogue, all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily pick up otherwise. And so something is going on in your subconscious every single time you read a story, and you're learning what you like and don't like. Usually when people start writing, sometimes you almost imitate your favorite authors, but like eventually you come up with your own style. But the more you read and the more widely you read, the more you can kind of with your own storytelling. And I also like to tell people, and maybe this is just because I was a journalist, it's really great if you read a newspaper or magazines or online journalism, because this helps a lot with dialogue. You're seeing people talk about one thing, right? Like different sides of the story, and they're talking about it together in their own voices. And so I always think that's a really interesting way to learn to build dialogue. Read the newspaper, read magazines, see people talk about one thing, like whether that's a dog show or whatever, then they're talking about it and they're seeing their different points of view, their different voice, and you're learning kind of how to set that up so that your characters don't all sound the same. So when I started this presentation, I showed you this slide with all my fancy credentials and my degrees, everything. But the truth is you don't need this. Like, I know plenty of authors who finish high school, not finish college, people who have completely unrelated degrees. I know a very great like fantasy writer who's an engineer, like electrical engineer. There's a lot of romance authors who are readers as their full-time job. I would say like majority of published authors have a daytime job. We're paid in a very unusual way. If you want to know how that works, I can explain during the questions. But the majority of us have a tech job. I have been a full-time author since 2020, it's the pandemic, and virtual kindergarten, which did not go well together with a real job. And I had enough projects, I was just afraid to quit the job because of how we're paid. Really, you don't need all these fancy things to write a book. You really just need like to make the effort, take the time. That's the next thing, right? I usually, every time I do one of these things, I have somebody come up to me and it's like, always want to write, I just don't have time. And I get it, I'm a parent, like for the sandwich generation at this point. But I can tell you, you can do 15 minutes at a time to write a book and knock it out. And I will show you. So I always like to use this slide. Do you guys know who this is? Anybody have a guess? Ernest Hemingway. He is on his ranch in Montana. This is a picture for Time magazine, so it's pretty staged. It stresses me out because he doesn't have a paperweight on his manuscript, and I'm like, everything is totally blown away. But he is the very picture of a writer. When I tell people I'm a full-time author, I know that's where the brain goes, right? That I'm like Ernest, sitting there with my typewriter. I'm not. So what you see on the right here is a screenshot from my cell phone. And so when I wrote Sea Witch, I was on maternity leave with my daughter who's now 11. And the only time I had to write, and I was like, I gotta write, like while I'm off for 12 weeks off my job, was on my phone. And the best time I had was when I was working out because I'm just running. I'm like one of those people that if I don't work out, I'm a jerk. You can ask my husband. So I wasn't like going out running because I wanted to stay close to home. We had a stationary bike. And so I would just pull out my phone and I'd read what I wrote the day before and then I'd start writing. And like that, I could write about some words out. And then on the weekends, when I had more time, I would type everything into a Word doc. I would cut and paste it because I edited it as I went. And then in 10 weeks, I had the manuscript, which was awesome. It was actually pretty good one too, because I had time to edit through it. And so I found the time little by little and used the technology I had. And you know, if you had seen me at like the gym doing that, I would have looked like I was just messing around with my phone for an hour. It was actually telling a story. And most of my books are about 80,000 to 100,000 words. So if I'm writing 1,000 words a day, like you can see how that just over time. And I do find that if you're working in something daily, like it's like a snowball going down, right? So just an example that do it however you want. You're interested, right? And then step 3, and this is where I explain how publishing works. Don't give up. This is a business. It is, one of my friends has called it a business that looks personal, but it's still a business. Because you are pouring out your heart and soul, and then somebody in a conference room in New York is making a decision on if they're gonna buy it, how much they're gonna pay you, if they're gonna promote it at all, or if they're gonna post. It's not really up to you. And again, this is traditional publishing. This is how this works. So this is kind of the 7-step guide of how you write a book and how you read a book. And I call it how books are made because my husband's always like, I just don't understand how books are made because like traditional publishing just never makes sense, even though I've done this for so many years. So first of all, you have to have a really good story idea. And you heard when I was pitching my books, a lot of what we do is kind of high level. It's X meets X because that is shorthand for what you're getting. But it's the execution that's completely different. So if you have an idea you think is great, just go for it. Don't freak out if you find out another book exists that sounds really similar because anything coming out of you is going to sound different than whatever that was about. Maybe read it so you know. Other than that. And then you have to write the whole thing. A lot of people can bang out 50 pages, that's amazing, but they can't finish the whole thing. So they want to see that you can do it. And you can do it if you want to do it. The next is you find a literary agent. So I was talking about the Big Five, published by all 5 Big Five. They're Macmillan, Hachette, HarperCollins, S&S, and Penguin House that merged. They used to be separate. We wish they would have called themselves Random Penguin, but it didn't. Although if you look at their logo, it's like a penguin outside the Random House logo, so it looks like a penguin like just standing in the street. It does look like a random penguin. But they won't take unsolicited manuscripts. You have to literary agent. So that's like kind of the first gatekeeper make happy. And then it's easier to get a literary agent than a publisher. But there aren't that many agents. So I like to explain like a triangle, like a pyramid scheme. So it's not fake, not like a real pyramid scheme. Say like we have 400 literary agents in the United States. I don't know how many there actually are. Technically, you don't have to have like credentials for agents. That's another thing you gotta look out for. You do not pay these people. They get paid when you get paid. So say there are 400. Say there are 100 that do young adult. That's what you want to write. Say you want to write a young adult fantasy like Sea Witch. There might be 50. And then only 25 of them might be open to new clients. Agents will often close to new submissions so that they can work with the people they already have in the client. They make about 50% off of these car contracts. And so they need to be paid too. And so say there's only 25 that are open to new clients, and then you look at what they've sold and who their connections are, there's ways to do that. And you might decide 10 are good. And then you write them a letter that basically contains like the back and forth jacket as far as you're describing your book and your work, and then tell them a little about yourself. And then they usually ask like maybe the first 3 chapters, the first 50 pages. And if they like it, they'll come back and say, can I have more? They'll want the whole thing. And then it's a lot of waiting around, honestly. But if you get an agent to say yes, then they'll probably ask them to edit you. Maybe if you think it doesn't need revision, but they want to know that you can take criticism, because some folks in this industry are very precious about their words, and they do not want to hook you up with one of their editors that they know very well and have a relationship with and want to sell many books to if you can't take any sort of edits. And so then you perfect that book, they send it out, and they'll probably send it, my agent does 12 at a time. She generally calls them because she wants them to hear how excited she is about the manuscript before she sends it. But they do a lot of research as far as like not only their taste, but like what their calendar looks like. Do they have a lot of backup? Do they have backlog? Are they looking for something specific? Like that's what you're getting the agents to know. Like they have the connections. And then an editor says yes. You actually want them more than one to say yes, because that's how you make money when they fight. And then you wait 12 to 36 months. Bewitch, when it came out, my editor had actually just ended up with a whole bunch of work dumped on her desk because somebody left the publishing house. So my book was a year before we even signed the contract, which was really frustrating for me as like a new author, but it actually ended up working out in my favor because they were able to position my book really well, have it sell very well. But Sea Witch, we sold it in April of 2015, and it didn't hit the shelves until July of 2018. So you can see about all that waiting. I waited more than a year for this. There's a lot of waiting, and then you work on the next thing. That's when I wrote For Like a Girl. And then your book becomes a real thing. It wants to show the slides. And eventually you have this many. So that is kind of my like background into how publishing works. Have time for questions. I think we've got 15 minutes or so. If anybody has anything to ask. Yes.
At what point would you pursue copyright that you don't have your book stolen in that publishing process?
Well, it's kind of a handshake agreement, right? I have good relationships with editors at this point, but the agent is looking out for you. Everybody knows that these things are ours. However, there have been recently, and I know you guys are going to talk about AI on Thursday. Very recently, a very high level literary agent was very concerned because he had heard stories of overworked editors putting books that are not published into AI to summarize them before their acquisition. That is terrifying because that is something that's not published. They don't own. We own it, and they're not necessarily telling you that they're doing that. So there's a lot of discussions in the book world of like proper use of AI. I don't touch it. I turn off Copilot. I don't touch anything. A lot of authors feel the same way. The publishing house is very concerned because we use Microsoft for everything. That's how you turn it into a script. And as they're making it in AI, then that makes us concerned that it's using our books to be trained. I do have books that were trained by the Anthropic model, and that's part of the big lawsuit. So my books were used without my permission. And now it's up to me to go and try to get the money that they'll probably actually get my publisher if they own my copyright. Because this whole weird thing, really it's all about relationship management. First time somebody does something wrong, they're out. Like publishing is very small. And authors in general are very against AI. We don't want any AI that they covers. Don't want any AI touching anything. And sometimes that is, in disagreement with what editors are hearing inside the house where they want them to be more efficient. So pay them more, having more editors, like you use this thing to be paid money for to make your life better. So yeah, it's a big kind of mess, and we're really just hoping that everybody is on board all the time. And sometimes they're not. We're just really careful with who you share stuff with. At this point, the only people seeing the book before it's published are my agent and my editor. I don't trust anybody else. Is there one over here? Yes.
How much research do you do? Because I know your sports books, you probably have a lot of background on, but some of the other books, I think about historical.
Yeah.
Do you actually go to different countries?
I do a lot of research. I do as much as I can. Honestly, the fantasy books, you can like yada, yada, yada things a little bit. But I do want things to be as real as possible, because even in fantasy, the second you are asking the reader to jump the shark a little too much, or like to suspend disbelief just a little too much, it can take you out, right? But for example, the book I can't talk about is set in a real place that I need to go to. I've never set a book in a real place, but it's two for reasons, and I need to go there, and then I need to write a really nice author note on how I messed everything up. Well, just change things to make my life easier. But yeah, I do as much research as I can. We do, of course, get edited, but you cannot trust an editor to catch everything. Like, it's on me to catch things and do the best I can. But we do have some like interesting conversations on like how things work in real life. Pretty often, actually, and like especially when you're writing contemporary, sometimes that's harder to write in fantasy because that's the world we all live in, and you don't want it to be so set in a year or something where like things could change, like, and so it can be really sticky on how to get it exactly right. I'll go back to this. So Running Back to You was actually the first book I wrote with my kids, the same age as one of the characters, which has never happened to me before. And my editor was like, we really need to have the scenes in the lockers. And I was like, my kid doesn't have a locker because the high school where my son goes, they got rid of it. They have lockers. They don't use them, and they haven't since COVID because they didn't want them like getting all together. And so we had this really interesting conversation on like how high school actually works. She was like, well, do they use actual books? No. So if they're at the lockers to get books, like, you know, I need to make a joke about how they use or how they need to get the, things like that. Or because I write sports books, making sure you get the seasons right, characters are playing for different sports, because that varies state by state. Yeah, so I do a lot of, but like the business will say to you, they cover a lot of ground on horseback. Do I know if you can actually cover that amount of ground on horseback in a day? No, I don't. Like, it's fantasy, yada, 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 kind of map.
They're actually doing fantasy then.
Yes, yes. Except when you make a magical system, if you don't adhere to your magical system, everyone calls you out on it. Like, you have to have like lockdown. Because people will find holes in it. If you veer from your rules, you have to have a reason why, which is kind of.
You can talk about how you integrate your work day with Jerry.
Oh, yeah. So the question was about how my day goes. So when I worked a full-time job, that's what I did. I would get up at 4:15 in the morning, run 6 miles, I turn on a coffee pot, and then I write until 7, my kids leave. And then I would work a ton on the weekends. But now that I'm a full-time author, it's a little bit different. However, I still get up that early because I like the thinking time. So I'm like out there running, either listening to an audiobook, or I make like playlists of songs that go along with whatever story I'm working on. And then my brain gets going. And so like, I'm sure so many people have passed me on the side of the road and been like typing into my phone because I got in my head, like while I'm running. Because if I get home and then somebody pounces on me, like it's over. Like I'm not gonna remember what I did. But then it's really nice actually working from being an author because, you know, I can walk my daughter to school, I can be there when my son gets home early from high school, so he has a 0 hour. But then I basically have from like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. to write. And it is a different experience because I have a daily chance. My agent is actually in South Africa. Our agency is in New York, but she lives in South Africa on a winery. Nice. So I get emails from her in the morning. So usually in the morning when I get back from walking to school, I will take care of all my like kind of admin stuff. And then I will usually work on a book for 2 hours until lunch, have lunch, and then maybe 2 more hours. If I'm on a deadline, that could change. I don't like to write at night, so I think about it. Although sometimes I've had to. And it really depends on if you're writing or if you're editing. I feel like I could write in spurts, I mentioned, like on my phone. But when you're editing, I feel like you need more of like an actual sit down, like stare at it time. And so if I'm working on more than one project at once, which I'm doing right now, a lot of the time I'll divide my day in half. So I'll start the day with one project and I'll switch over after lunch. And that works pretty well for me as far as balance and things. But a lot of writing is actually just thinking about it too, like giving your mind like a chance to catch up. And so sometimes like we say that like staring at the wall is like working, or like for a walk is working, because you're thinking about it all the time. So I do a lot of that too. Yes.
So you're just talking about right now about having to write, you're obviously writing, you share the story about the thing. Time, your literary agent or whatever, how fast you have to, or come up with an idea, you just come up with a little, okay, I have another idea. You know, or do they tell you, hey, like, we need you to have another, like, that's another thing people ask, well, like, are they making you write all these books? I know that's like, you know, we sure they're author, but we always, as librarians, we always complain about, like, my gosh, it's tired, like that.
Yeah.
You know, ever felt like there's more, you know, like the whole show.
Who has ghostwriters?
Like, sitting on books like on a monthly basis, trying to catch up with all that.
I will say, so I had 3 books come out in a calendar year. I only have 3 left. That was terrible. That was Sea Witch Rising came out August of 2019, and then For Like a Girl came out January 2020, and The Princess of Safety came out in July of 2020. And that was really hard because promoting the books with and actually in our contracts, they will basically put a non-compete clause where they don't want you promoting something else within a certain amount of time. And so that can cause problems. And we always are trying to work around all those things. It's honestly, again, I've been lucky. So a lot of the time when we sell a book, so like, for example, For Like a Girl, I sold it, 1 book deal, but what they have is what's called option. So they have an option for right of first refusal for something. Usually my agent will narrow that down. She'll be like the same thing in the same world. You can look at it for a period of 60 days. And then you can move on and you can try to sell it to someone else. And so it's smart to have something in your back pocket at a time. When I sold this book, our option was something in the same world. And my editor wanted that before this book comes out. So that's how we ended up with the sequel so quickly after it. Would it have been better if she bought 2 books at once? Yes. But honestly, some publishers are not doing that right now because they're gambling and there's too much time on the same authors and you're taking up spot for somebody else. So if you have your slate of books already set for the next 3 years, it's hard to acquire the next big book because you've got your time and your money and it's been taken. So a lot of publishers are doing one at a time. But then that creates a weird situation for me where I'm just constantly working on something in the background to see if we can sell it. And because that's just how publishing works at this point. And so nobody is telling me to do things. Like there are definitely slimmer writers that are like, I don't know, just take 2 years to do this. But that means you're not being paid for another 2 to 4 years. That is assuming you sell it right away. And the industry can change so fast that people may forget you exist when the shiny thing comes along. In my case, I lost several editors during the pandemic. Either they were laid off, they left. And so I have had to make relationships constantly. Like, I had 4 different editors for the trilogy because they left or they were actively or something else happened. And I had 3 different editors for Like a Girl Is On How You Fall. So like things just happen, and then you can't get anywhere making relationships, which really stinks. But no, it's up to me. Usually my agent will have a call in January, and we have another one halfway through the year where we plan. Like I send her my best ideas, we talk through them, and then we decide what we're gonna work on, not working on tonight.
Over here.
Yes.
So have you sold any of those books before writing the manuscript? Or is it always?
Oh, yeah. So the Princess Will Save You, The Queen Will Betray You, that was a 2-book deal. So I sold The Princess Will Save You on a proposal, which means I wrote basically the first act and like a detailed synopsis, and then said, here's what I want to write otherwise. It became a trilogy because I was writing The Queen Will Betray You. I actually had a deadline. Do you remember the week everything shut down during COVID? In March of 2020, that's when that book was due, and I was like, this book is not working. Like, I realized when I got in there that I had packed too much story in it. And my editor's like, just work on what you can, like we'll make it happen, and then they laid her off. So then I got a new editor, and I was like, hi, nice to meet you. Hey, I think I might have an extra book in here. She's like, okay, let me work on it. And I told her, I pitched her, The King Will Kill You. And so she was working on that in the background while I was making the book perfect. And actually there's an epilogue in The Queen Will Betray You this page. And that leads into the 3rd book. And so I held on to that epilogue while she's on the background trying to find out if I could make it a trilogy. And we found out at pretty much like last point you can find out. There's this time when you look at the book all laid out, it's called First Pass, that's actually the last time you see it. It's in a PDF format, it's just like it said in the book. And she's like, all right, we got the green light. And so we slapped that epilogue in there right at the last second. And then I had to write the 3rd book. But that also sold Eliza Conjure because it was a 2-book deal. But they were like, we don't want another book in the 2 world. Like, what else do you have? And I was like, I have that was magic. It's like, great, here's another editor for you. So sometimes we can do that, but really it's become more rare. I think they were kind of doing that during the pandemic because they didn't want that full slate of books. They wanted to know what they had and how much money they had spent. Because there are paper shortages, people were in bookstores looking at books. The Princess Will Save You is definitely one where they spent a lot on the cover because they expected to walk into the bookstore and see that beautiful cover and buy it, and then no one was in a bookstore. So like they couldn't go on sales, like it's kind of a hard thing for them to figure out. And so I benefited a little bit from that.
Is it stressful when you have like a contract with the party? Sorry, you gotta write that book.
I actually like it. I have friends that do not. We were talking about my friend Megan Bannon, who's a Kansas City author. She's written Young Adult, but she's had some very popular fantasy books. She cannot write. If she has a 2-book deal, she gets out about it. And so she has literally been like, I want 1 book, don't get 2 books, I want 1. And fought with her publishers about it because it's just how her brain works. But it does put you kind of behind the 8 ball as far as like trying to get a book out within a reasonable time that people remember that you have the books. So the leader of the pack is coming out next summer because it should go 1 year after Such a Witch. However, in between that, we sold a book that's completely unrelated to a different editor. That's the book I can't talk about, which was already slated for summer 2027. So I thought when we sold this that we would have to go fall 2027. And my agent and my editor were like, no, we really should have that a year out to make people read Such a Witch happy. So then she had to go back to the editor who had already booked the other book and say, hey, would it be okay if we slid that? So that book is now fall 2027. She was very complicated, but sometimes they are not. And that was stressful but that's what the agent is for. Like they have all the hard conversations for you. You don't wreck your relationship.
So if you're talking to young, middle school, high school kids about sewage or, something like when you, or from the Princess Bride, say they should read these first, because they are kind of useful.
Yeah,
I love the Princess Bride, read the book. Like how would you recommend it for kids? If you're saying like, this is something you're interested in, and then you also want to compare with the original.
yeah, the thing about writing things that are inspired by a retelling is you are in conversation with whatever that person's like experience was with the original work, right? So yeah, for the Princess Will Save You, it's like you can read it without having watched the movie or read the book. And I mean, I really love that movie. That's why I wanted to explore it. So yeah, I mean, most of the time when I talk about sewage, people are like, "Oh, Disney, we had this conversation already." They haven't the original. So a lot of the time I'm like, that original tale, it takes less than an hour to read. You can easily find it. It's kind of interesting if you have time to look at it, but you don't have to. So, or like Knives Out. Like not a lot of high schoolers have seen Knives Out. So when I pitched Eliza Conjur's Knives Out, usually that's and older. So yeah, that can be kind of a struggle sometimes, but I just want everyone to enjoy fun stories. So
What you sold me, like, these are all, talking about you, it's my favorite movie, you're on it, like, okay, yeah, I'm all in.
well, I'll tell you why I wrote Princess Will Save You, because I do love Sprite. Not to spoil a 35-year-old movie. But this Buttercup, the Princess Bride in the story, is she's very feisty at the beginning. She says what she thinks, and then she ends up in this sort of sham of a relationship with Prince Humperdinck, who gets married to her, and when she really just wants to meet, or she wants to stay with her true love, Wesley, who she thought had died but did not die. But after the sham wedding, she ends up in a private room alone with Dagger, and she decides she's just going to end it, and then Wesley comes and saves her. That's the spoiler. But I thought the original Buttercup was use the knife the whole time. Like she could have fought her way out and tried to find Wesley. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write something that would use the knife the whole time, use the sword in this case. In conversation with one of my favorites. Well, thank you for having me, everybody.
Thank you. All right, what to do and fire some of there. Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow at lunch with Mark Kyler. Enjoy it.